An unexpected return that shattered my life. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. The night my life cracked open, snow hissed against the library windows, and the radiator clicked like a metronome for bad decisions. My phone buzzed at 11:58 p.m., the kind of hour that belongs to ambulances and secrets. When I opened my apartment door, my mother, Elena, gone 13 years, a photograph I kept face down, stood on the doormat with a soaked duffel and eyes that skittered past mine. "Don't ask," she whispered, pressing the strap into my hands. "Just hide this for tonight. I am Nora, a public librarian who files more than books. I file small promises, overdue apologies, and routine that keeps me steady. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to lead our tax prep workshop for seniors, the kind who bring cookies and say my name like I matter. If word gets out that my vanished mother is back and I'm harboring something, I lose trust I've spent years carefully cataloging." I stepped aside anyway. The hallway swallowed her shape, and the familiar smell, cheap rose perfume varnished over cigarettes, arrived before she did. "Mark, my fiancé," muttered from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" I lied, wrong door, and guided Elena to the kitchen where the light is always gentler. She kept her coat on, rain stippling the floor. "You look healthy," I said, because other words were crowded by questions. "Where were you? Why now?" She tapped the duffel. "A favor. One night. Then I'm gone again." I thought of Mrs. Patel downstairs, who believes mercy needs rails. She once told me, "Sympathy without boundaries is a sinkhole." I bent, unzipped the bag an inch, and saw the corner of a file folder, plastic sleeves like fish scales, and a leather checkbook stamped with someone else's initials. "Elena," I said, using her name like a handle I wasn't sure would hold. "Is any of this mine?" She didn't answer, only reached to zip it shut, knuckles raw, a wedding band I had never seen biting into pale skin. I slid the duffel into the hall closet behind the sleeping coats and closed the door like I was pinning a live wasp under glass. My phone buzzed again, unknown number. 3 rings, a pause, then hard knocking at my apartment. I didn't ask where she had been, because the first rule when ghosts return is this: they answer only the questions they can survive. Instead, I boiled water, set out the emergency mugs with chipped blue rims, and tried to remember how to be a daughter without being a doormat. Childhood at our table was a triangle missing one side. Me, Dad's empty chair, and Elena's laughter like a song you can't catch. On my 10th birthday, she promised a picnic under the elm. By noon the sky opened, by 2 she was gone, and by evening I learned the taste of canned spaghetti and waiting. In high school, she sent postcards from cities spelled like wishes: Tucson, Reno, Santa Fe, with drawings of suns and a steady apology that never arrived in person. When Dad died, the funeral director asked if there would be a spouse photograph on the memory board. I nodded yes, and taped up a driver's license copy, because that was all I had. Mrs. Patel kept us fed, brought rice with cardamom and stories with edges, and taught me to iron a blouse so it could be armor. 2 weeks ago, before the snow turned the street into static, I received a letter from a collector in Phoenix addressed to my old last name. It claimed I owed $12,417 on a line of credit with a signature that floated like Elena's, except for the way the R hooked backward. I took the letter to work, asked our tax volunteer, retired accountant, 2 hearing aides, what to do. He tapped the paper, said, "Disputed in writing. Keep copies. Don't call." I mailed the dispute and made a folder labeled "Do Not Ignore," then tried to forget we share blood with unanswered questions. Now Elena sat in my kitchen like a rumor made solid, steam curling around her face. "You look like your father," she said, which was strange since my father had been a long quiet and a toolbox. "Where did you go?" Slipped out before I could catch it. She stared into tea. "I kept you safe," she murmured. "It's always safer at a distance." I wanted to say distance doesn't sign my name on loans, but I heard a shuffle in the hallway and remembered the duffel pulsing behind the coats like a bad heart. Then she asked if I still had the key to the old house. The key lived on a nail inside my junk drawer, taped to a note that said "Don't lose on principle." At dawn I walked to the old house on Juniper, a bungalow with a porch that sagged like it missed conversation. The yard was a white sheet. I wrote my name in it with my steps. Inside, the air held a museum of dust. Elena moved like she knew where everything wasn't. In the bedroom, she pulled a shoebox from the closet. Inside another box. Inside a false bottom that creaked like it remembered us. It wasn't keepsakes. It was mail addressed to me at places I've never lived and names I never used. Some returned stamped undeliverable. 2 driver's licenses with my face, but different addresses. One in Mesa, one in Peoria, and a social security card that felt like holding a counterfeit of myself. I had to, she said, which is not a sentence that opens doors. I noticed the signatures on 3 documents. One in R. Ainsley. Not me, not any name I've filed. One Nora R. Patel, and one Nora Ainsley with a looping R that hooked backward like in the collector letter. Why the variations? I asked. Elena tucked hair behind her ear, the way she does when a story is selecting its bones. Because mistakes look human, she said, and I felt the floor tilt. Back at the library, the phone began to sing a single note of wrongness. I answered and a man breathed, then said, "Is this Nora Ainsley? We need to verify employment for a loan restructure." I put him on hold, asked our manager if I could take a personal call, and returned with a voice I use for patron rules. "I'm not employed by you, and I'm not your Nora," I said. He chuckled. "Of course you are," and read my social security number aloud with 2 digits swapped. I hung up, filed a report with our IT for the spam log, and then saw Elena outside through the glass, leaning against the bike rack, pretending we were strangers. Then a silver sedan idled, window cracked, camera watching my apartment door. The library's winter fundraiser arrived like a small-town prom. Fairy lights, raffle baskets, a shaky trio playing standards near the coat check. I wore a navy dress that said dependable, and Mark adjusted the mic for the opening remarks. Elena insisted on coming as a civilian, hair pulled into a neat bun like a disguise for her history. Mrs. Patel squeezed my elbow and stage whispered, "Boundaries, beta," then stationed herself by the cookie table like a general. I was midway through thanking donors when the doors opened and brought in cold air and a man in a cheap suit with a folder under his arm. He waded through the applause, then approached the podium and asked, in a voice intended to be quiet but engineered to travel, "Are you Nora Ainsley?" "I'm Nora Patel," I said, steady into the mic. He set the folder on the lectern and turned to Elena. "Ms. Ruiz, you've been served." The room lurched sideways. Elena's mouth made a practiced "oh" while cameras, a few donors, a local reporter, sniffed drama. She grabbed the papers, hands trembling, then whispered, "Not here," and moved toward the exit. 2 people near the punch bowl murmured about bad checks and a storage unit auction, not noticing I was within hearing distance. I finished the speech on autopilot, then found her in the alley, breath visible, papers open to language that felt like teeth. Lien, default, personal guarantee. Case number. Court date. "It isn't all me," she said, laughter without joy. "Some of it is administrative confusion." "Which part?" I asked. "The parts with your name," she said, and I had to lean against the brick to remember how standing works. Mark came out and said the reporter wanted a quote. Mrs. Patel intercepted him and said the reporter wanted decaf. Elena shoved a page into my hands, a notarized document authorizing a line of credit, my signature at the bottom, neat as if I'd practiced. The notary stamp listed a bank branch across town and a date that collided with my live-streamed story time. The video would be a time-stamped alibi, if anyone cared to look. Across the street, the silver sedan idled again, and when the driver stepped out, I recognized the man from the phone by the way he pronounced my fake name. He smiled and asked loudly if Nora Ainsley enjoyed public scenes. After the fundraiser, the night refused to end. Mark drove in silence, turning the radio down every time it dared to speak. In the apartment, he stood in the kitchen with his hands on the counter like it was the last solid thing. "I can't do scandal," he said, not unkindly. "My firm screens for publicity blowback. If this explodes, I could lose my promotion." I wanted to say love is not a performance review. Instead, I said, "I didn't sign anything." He stared at the closet. "Maybe not with a pen." Elena took the couch, shoes still on, muttering to herself in half-sentences that sounded like receipts. At 3 a.m., Mrs. Patel slipped a note under the door. "Tea at 8, bring spine," and a small bag of cardamom pods like courage disguised as groceries. By morning, a photo from the fundraiser, Elena lit by flash, the envelope on the lectern, was on a neighborhood group with a caption that implied crime is contagious. Our manager emailed, "Take the day." HRCC'd and wrote about supporting staff through personal challenges in a tone that meant stay invisible. Mark packed an overnight bag to clear his head, which sounded like the preface to distance. He kissed my hair. "I love you," he said, meaning I'm sorry. Before he left, he paused at the closet, then shook his head and chose not to open it. Elena woke near noon, hair flattened like a broken halo, and asked if we had anywhere to be at 3. "Court," I asked. She grimaced. "Storage auction." Mrs. Patel arrived on the dot, sat straight-backed, and listened without interrupting, which is how she measures love. "You will not save anyone by burning your paperwork," she said. "You will save everyone by keeping records and making copies." She slid a spiral notebook toward me. "New rule. Everything in writing. Dates, amounts, names, license plates." I wrote silver sedan, and O plates, and my hand was steadier than my chest. Elena looked away. "It's complicated," she said, which is a synonym for "I'd like you blind." I set the duffel and the shoebox on the table like two defendants awaiting arraignment. A burner phone inside lit at 12:59 with a text. "Change of plan. Use Doorby at 2. I didn't realize Doorby led to the one place that could break us. The storage facility crouched behind a strip mall where storefronts blinked open like tired eyes. Doorby was a side entrance with a keypad, the code written in faint Sharpie under the ledge. 1973, Elena's birth year. Inside, a corridor of roll-ups echoed with metal conversations. Unit 114 belonged, according to the ledger, to Nora Ainsley. Elena's hands shook as she tried the key. Mine didn't as I took it and opened the lock. The unit smelled like dust that had kept secrets for sport. On plastic shelves sat bankers' boxes labeled Nor, Tax, Nor, Medical, and the Koi Nor Misk. In Nor, Tax, I found a letter about a refund adjustment addressed to me at a Peoria apartment. Stapled to it was a prepaid debit card with 2 withdrawals and a balance of $7.16. In Nor, Misk, a velvet pouch held 3 SIM cards, each taped to a note with dates and a single initial, M.R.J. A ledger listed cash advances in increments of $600 taken from different ATMs around town, each with timestamps that overlapped my work calendar like a petty alibi. "Whose plan is this?" I asked. Elena ran a hand over her face. "It was supposed to be temporary. A patch." I photographed everything, the way our tax volunteers taught our seniors. Date in the corner, wide shot, close up, no cropping. On the back shelf was a taped shoebox with a key inside, very small and ornate, like it belonged to jewelry or a diary. Elena flinched when I held it up. "That's not for here," she said, and reached for it too quickly. We left with copies and the key. I paid the month's rent in my name so the facility wouldn't lock us out. Back home, I logged each item into the spiral notebook and emailed photos to myself and Mrs. Patel. Subject line: "Clouds don't burn." Elena paced, tried to smoke on my fire escape, and then admitted she had another phone. She placed it on the table between us. "Cheap," scuffed, the wallpaper a sunset, and said, "If it rings, let it. If it vibrates twice, answer." I decided I'd answer to someone else instead, and typed Detective Ruiz's name into my browser. Detective Ruiz's voicemail was a sandpaper baritone instructing callers to email. I wrote a summary blunt as a door. Mother returned, identity misuse, documents, lien, storage unit, risk. Then I went hunting for people with clipboards and uniforms. At the bank listed on the notary stamp, a manager named Felicia looked at my ID, then at her screen, then at the ceiling like she was asking it permission. "You opened a line last April," she said carefully. "Employment verified at Juniper Community Outreach." I swallowed. "I work at Juniper Public Library." "Different EIN," she said, and printed a page that showed a faxed form with a header cut off. The signature was my name, but the "are" still hooked backward like a fish refusing the net. "We'll flag it," she said. "No more draws." In the parking lot, I called the accountant who had once prepared Elena's taxes, a man named Joel with a voice of coffee and resignation. He remembered her as cash poor, hope rich, and agreed to meet at a diner where the pie glass case squeaked when opened. Joel said Elena had asked about authorized user status last year and mentioned my flexible hours. "I shelved that idea," he added quickly. Told her not to involve family. I showed him the ledger of ATM pulls. He frowned, then traced the times. See this? He tapped 3 dates. Same minute, different machines. You can't be in Mesa and Peoria at 2:14 p.m. I checked my calendar. At 2:14 on one of those days, I was live on camera reading about very brave ducks. He scribbled a name on a napkin. A pawn shop where he'd seen Elena once with a woman named R. R who? I asked. He shrugged. Red scarf, raspy laugh. I drove past the pawn shop twice before going in, felt every security camera brush my skin. The clerk glanced at my face, then at a Polaroid under the counter, and asked if I was here to pick up the watch. The claim tag read Nora in Sharpie, the handwriting leaning left like Elena's storms taught it. What watch? I asked. Stainless, engraved, he said, sliding a ticket. Deposit in cash, balance due Friday. I photographed the ticket, stepped into air that pinched, and my burner phone vibrated twice. I answered to a voice that said my name like a verdict. Nora, the voice said, amused and crisp. At last. You're punctual when properly motivated. Who is this? I asked. Someone who keeps Elena honest, they said. Tell her R approves of your initiative. R, red scarf, raspy laugh. There's a folder in the duffel, the voice continued. Market returned, and everything becomes quieter. The call ended before I could stage courage. At home, Elena hovered as I unzipped the duffel and pulled out the folder I'd barely seen. Inside were printouts of wire transfers to an offshore bank I had to look up. The amounts were careful, just under reporting thresholds. 8,900, 9,100, 8,750. Footsteps trying to pass for rank. There were guarantee letters bearing my name as secondary support, my employment at Juniper Community Outreach, and a photocopy of my driver's license with my address conveniently blurred. The letters were signed by Carter and Bell, attorneys at law, except the font on Bell wavered, as if someone breathed on it mid-print. Among the pages, a rental agreement for a Mesa apartment where Nora Ainsley had lived 3 months without ever paying utilities, and a medical bill for a clinic visit tied to my insurance number. I spread them on the table like a quilt of bad intentions. Elena leaned over, jaw tight. I didn't want this, she said, which was both true and useless. What do you want? I asked. To stop running, she said. From who? From before, she said. And finally, from R? I checked my accounts. Nothing missing yet, but a fraud alert blinked red over the lien. If HR learned about any of this, my job as the trustworthy face of public services could evaporate. If Mark learned more, our wedding might, too. Mrs. Patel set tea between us and said, name it so you can hold it. Identity patchwork. Unauthorized guarantees. Offshore trickle. Pressure calls from R. Elena breathed, reached into her coat, and placed a tiny ornate key on the table, the twin to the storage key. One more place, she whispered. If we go there, you'll understand the why. I agreed before understanding that the why might erase me completely. I spent the next morning turning my apartment into a war room. I opened a new email, created a cloud folder named after, and uploaded photographs with file names that would make sense to strangers. 2025-01-12_offshore_wire_8900. JPG 2025-01-12_fake_n_form. PDF. I recorded a call to the bank's fraud line, obtained a case number, and read the numbers back twice so they landed. I called the county recorder and confirmed the deed transfer date. The clerk said the notary was legit, but the office used that day's stamps on a stack processed later. Timing that could be bent by anyone who knew where to press. Mrs. Patel drafted a script for me to use with anyone official. Keep emotion outside the sentences, keep facts inside them. Mark texted, we should postpone tasting. I thumbed back. We should postpone everything until I'm not a committee. I printed screenshots of our story time stream with timestamps visible. I bookmarked my HR ethics training that, ironically, warned us about conflicts of interest. When Detective Ruiz replied, his email was short. Bring what you have to the precinct at 3. Do not bring Elena. Elena insisted on coming anyway. They won't understand, she said. They don't have to, I said. They only have to measure. At the precinct, Ruiz wore a suit like an apology. He read quietly, asked short questions, and said, you're collecting well. But you're not safe as long as her thinks you're useful. So we cut usefulness, I said. He nodded. We bait documentation into a place where it can't be denied. Bank or court, cameras and witnesses. I asked if Mark should be there. Ruiz said, invite anyone whose belief you want to anchor. That evening, I set my plan in motion. A meeting at Felicia's branch tomorrow with a notary, our case numbers, and 2 empty chairs intended for truth. Elena paced the kitchen, then pressed the ornate key into my palm like a pardon she couldn't sign. If you're doing this, she said, you need to know what unlocks us. Tomorrow, I said. First, we hold the mirror up. I drafted invites. Felicia, Ruiz, Mark, subject line, verification meeting, documents and identity clarification. Then I hovered over Elena's name and let the cursor blink until I could breathe again. The burner phone hummed twice, and a message said simply, bring the folder or bleed. Mrs. Patel insisted we eat before we try to fight, so dinner became lentils, rice, and a quiet staging of courage. She lit one candle and declared it a courtroom where only facts could sit. Feelings had to wait in the hall. Elena arrived late, hair damp, eyes bright the way storms are bright on traffic cameras. You don't have to do this, she said, sitting opposite me like we were negotiating a ceasefire. I have to do exactly this, I said, and slid a copy of the offshore transfers across. She didn't touch the paper. You don't know what happens when R isn't fed. Then tell me, I said. She swallowed. I owed money before you were born. I owed choices. R turns debts into favors and favors into hooks. The first hook was small. And the last. Elena's smile was brief and terrible. The last is always family. Mark knocked during dessert, and for a breath we were 4 around a table for the first time. He looked at the documents, then at me. Are you sure public is wise? Private hasn't stopped anything, I said. Mrs. Patel poured tea like a gavel. Honesty is not a spectacle. It is a spine, she said. Elena reached for my hand. If you expose this, R exposes me. If you protect me, R keeps you clean. The old bargain arrived dressed as love. I almost agreed, mouth already forming yes. Mrs. Patel touched my wrist. Beta, she said softly. You are mistaking pain relief for healing. Then the burner phone rattled across the table, screen lit with a photo of my library badge and a time-stamped threat beneath it. It read, skip the meeting and nothing breaks. Attend, and we lose our patience. Mark's jaw set. Call Ruiz, he said. I did. He told me to keep the meeting, forward the threat, and keep doors locked. Elena stood, chair scraping. If you love me, Nora, you'll burn that folder and we'll take a bus. To where? I asked. To when? She opened her mouth, closed it. To quiet. Quiet isn't the same as safety, I said, and in that moment I believed it hard enough to stand. I copied the files to a fresh drive labeled weather and slid it into my cardigan pocket. Elena stared at the candle in exhausted silence. The candle flickered, and someone tried our doorknob twice without knocking. Felicia reserved the small glass conference room that always made people behave like they were on camera, because they were. She arranged for a notary. I arranged for witnesses. Mark sat at one end, pale but present. Detective Ruiz stood near the door with a notebook, a geometry of steadiness. Felicia brought a monitor, an HDMI cable, and a stack of tissues that made me want to cry before we began. At 10 sharp, Elena slipped in wearing a plain gray sweater like a costume for remorse. You asked me not to, I said. I can't be absent from my own life, she replied, and took a chair against the wall. Felicia began, names for the record, case numbers, a careful outline of what we would and would not discuss. I slid the folder across, then the flash drive labeled weather. Ruiz connected the drive and opened the files one by one. The offshore wires, the faux employment verifications, the notary pages with dates that bent. He spoke quietly so the camera would catch each title. We will reverse draws pending investigation, Felicia said. We will also need to notify the other institution. Which one? I asked. She read a name I didn't recognize. Elena closed her eyes. The sound she made was small, but felt like furniture moving in another apartment. Ruiz placed the burner near the mic, so any reply would be recorded. He dialed R. The line clicked. A woman laughed, smoker's rasp. Nora, brave girl. Ruiz introduced himself and the fact of the recording. She hung up, then immediately texted the phone a photo of my library from across the street. He asked if Elena wished to make a statement. She whispered, "I tried to fix one mistake with 3 smaller ones." "Name R," Ruiz said. Elena laced her fingers. "Reisa," she said at last. The notary arrived then, asked for all IDs, and when I handed mine over, she compared it to a scanned copy in the file and frowned at the backward hook in the R. "That isn't your hand," she said. I looked at Elena. She nodded once like a confession. Felicia opened the last folder, pawn receipt, and displayed the engraving. For Nora, trust time. Time, it turned out, was the one thing we were about to run out of. The door opened mid-sentence, and Reisa walked in like she owned the building's angles. Red scarf, dark lipstick, a smile that believed it owned the room. She looked at the camera, then at Felicia's stack of tissues. "Always good to have props," she said, dropping a set of keys shaped like intentions on the table. Ruiz straightened. "Ms. Call me R," she said. "And let's not waste anybody's pension." She slid a flash drive across. Here's what actually happened. On the monitor, folders bloomed. Elena's first debt, my father's unpaid hospital bill, and Reisa's temporary identities that juggled charges and kept us housed. It worked until it didn't. A casino slide, a counterfeit boyfriend, and an urge to scale. Reisa narrated like a tour guide, generous with blame for everyone else. Then came a folder named Nora, drafts of IDs, practice signatures, a guide to building a credible citizen. "You were a template," Reisa said cheerfully. "Such a tidy life. Library, taxes on time, helpful videos with timestamps. You were perfect cover." Elena made a sound like a cup cracking. "I told you not to touch her." Reisa shrugged. "You told me when you were winning." Felicia spoke for the first time in a while. "Why bring this here?" Reisa looked at the camera again. "Because leverage works until someone points a camera at it." She smiled. "You're not the hero, librarian. You're the receipt." I felt anger arrive like winter wind through a bad window seal. Ruiz asked her motive, and Reisa's face softened into something almost honest. "Because liars get paid better than librarians," she said. "So I price truth." "That's not motive," I said. "That's costume." Elena whispered, "She's addicted to the rush," and Reisa laughed, applauding softly. "Guilty," she said. "If Nora confesses, the institutions swallow losses, and we all go home." Felicia shook her head. "Not happening." Reisa tapped the phone. "Then the librarian learns what happens when a building loses windows." Ruiz leaned in. "Threats on record," he said. "Keep talking." Reisa did, about layered accounts, cash advances, and guarantees that needed my clean air. She smiled again, too wide. "Pick your ending, Nora. Cover me or crack your future." I met her eyes, opened my mouth, and chose the option that burns. I told the truth while the camera blinked, and once said it, I couldn't unsay it. I didn't confess to crimes. I confessed to collecting evidence and refusing to be a costume. Reisa laughed, then swore, and Ruiz's hand moved in a small signal. 2 officers stepped inside like commas, changing the sentence. Elena's shoulders sank. She didn't cry. She exhaled a long white flag. Felicia ended the meeting with a recitation of steps: freeze accounts, reverse draws, notify agencies, flag notaries, send letters. Reisa was escorted out, still smiling as if the hallway belonged to her. Outside, the air felt newly invented. Mark walked beside me, but not touching, careful with his balance as if the sidewalk might tilt. "I'm proud," he said, and then, "I'm also terrified." At work the next day, HR asked if I wanted leave. I said no. At the circulation desk, a woman returned a gardening book and whispered that she'd seen the video and that I was brave. The next patron asked if I was going to be arrested. I shelved both comments with the same neural motion. Do not absorb or you'll drown. A letter arrived from the county. Hearing scheduled for the lien. Bring identification and any conflicting documents. Joel the accountant texted that he'd testify about Elena declining to involve me. Mrs. Patel brought samosas and sat in my kitchen while I reread everything until the words lost their edges. Mark slept at his place 2 nights, returned the third with a bag and a tentative hello. "I need to see where this lands," he said. I nodded. "Me too." Then night reached into our windows and set down a new bill. The pawn shop calling to say the watch's balance had been paid in full by Nora. And would I like to pick it up tomorrow? I went anyway. Sometimes you chase proof where it pretends to rest. The clerk handed me a small box, a stainless watch, a receipt stamped paid by cash, and a note. Trust time. Check the back. I turned the watch over. Under the engraving, a seam lifted. Inside was a micro SD card hidden between seconds. At home, I slotted the card into my laptop. A folder appeared. Videos. Clips of Elena and Reisa counting cash, screenshots of wires, Dorby recordings, and a final file named Nora Final. MP4. I clicked play and saw myself unlocking a door I'd never seen. Nora Final. MP4 wasn't me. It was someone wearing my haircut and a mask with my eyes printed on it, opening a door to a mailbox store and signing for packages that built a person I didn't recognize. The timestamp matched moments I had been on camera at work reading about ducks. The alibi wasn't a shield. It was a lighthouse illuminating how far apart the two Norris lived. I brought the card to Ruiz. He copied it, logged it, and said a phrase I needed. You have been wronged, not ruined. At the hearing, the lien was paused pending investigation. Felicia's bank reversed the draws and flagged the accounts. The other institution began to unwind guarantees. Elena entered a diversion program that required restitution and therapy. She agreed in writing to stop being a mystery at my expense. Reisa was charged with fraud, identity theft, and a list of things I had to read twice. Mark and I drew up boundaries like blueprints. We would postpone the wedding 6 months, keep separate accounts, share a calendar, and never open doors because guilt knocks nicely. Mrs. Patel made me a checklist: lock credit, freeze reports, get new ID, inform HR in writing, start therapy. I did all of it, plus something of my own, a document labeled terms of help that I would slide across any table that tried to conscript me. It read, in plain words, that help means truth, receipts, and an end date. It never means erasing myself. Elena signed a similar page before I transferred her first month's therapy payment. Therapy taught a new alphabet where every letter stood for no when needed. At work, I rebuilt trust the way I shelved books, patient, aligned. I taught fraud prevention basics on Saturdays. I called it paper shields. People brought shoe boxes and shook stories out of envelopes. Driving home one evening, I passed the storage facility and kept going. I almost kept driving. Instead, I parked, walked to door B, and slid the ornate key into a lock I hadn't noticed below the keypad. The floor shifted, and a hidden panel popped open with a tired sigh. I found the hidden panel behind door B by listening for wrong air. Inside was a ledger older than my apartment's paint. A brittle book where Elena's neat teenage handwriting documented payments to a landlord who raised rents whenever he lost at cards. There were also photographs: my father in a gown, me at 5 with frosting hair, Elena holding us from the side like she was practicing leaving. I copied what mattered and left what belonged to ghosts. On the drive home, the sun was thin but there. Light doesn't always warm, but it helps you steer. In the weeks after, life settled into a rhythm that didn't feel like punishment. Elena attended meetings, texted only logistics, and began to knit terrible scarves she called practice. Reisa pled out. I learned to say it without tasting metal. The lien resolved in my favor. My name returned to me like mail that finally found the right house. At the library, we added a paper shields board with dispute templates and numbers that answer. I saw shoulders lower when people realized they weren't alone and that a file folder can be a boat. Mark and I resumed planning the wedding with a new line item: contingency. We bought sturdy file boxes and a small crosscut shredder and called it romance anyway. On Sundays, I visit Mrs. Patel with bread, and we sit on her stoop. She tells me stories about when fear was cheaper and being a neighbor cost time, not proof. Sometimes Elena joins us, knitting in a color that looks like apology. I have learned this. Love without boundaries is an invitation to vanish. Boundaries are not fences built of anger. They are bridges with tolls. Pay with truth. Cross with care. Turn back if you refuse. If someone asks you to carry their secret, weigh it against your own name. If the math says you'll disappear, choose to stay visible. Practical things, for anyone listening: freeze your credit, memorize your baselines, photograph your documents, write dates in the corner, never sign in a hurry, and keep a duplicate of yourself where fire cannot reach. I keep one more thing now: an ugly watch that runs wrong, but reminds me time moves anyway. Tomorrow, I unlock only one door, and make sure it's mine.